Thank you for joining me. I'm Jehan Roberson. I'm the collection specialist for the Hemispheric Institute Digital Video Library. And I'm here today with two of the members of Hot Brown Honey.
For everyone at home, my name is Lisa Farlafi. I'm the director of Hot Brown Honey and also in the show.
And I'm Busty Beatz, and I'm the musical director.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And DJ, right?
And
Yeah.
Queen Bee.
Queen Bee, that's
Queen
right.
Bee, yeah. Since we're here.
Yeah. Sisters with Beyonce at the minute. But no.
It's really building on top of her Coachella video.
We're like, oh my god!
I haven't watched it yet.
I think we all spent the day yesterday watching
Oh,
it.
yeah. It's research. I
Yeah.
Well, so we were just talking about how Hot Brown Honey is an interdisciplinary, genre-bending performance. How would you all describe the work you do?
Yeah, we like to say it's a like theatrical explosion of colour, culture and controversy.
Ooh.
Yeah. So that's like our sort of tag. We also have a tagline which is fighting the power, never tasted so sweet.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. Like when we're in the street and you're walking around, just get up and people want to know what we do. Like it's what you lead with. It's like this is feminist theatre told through multiple genres. These are our stories that are from Australia and what women of colour stories can look like from Australia, but also those universal ties to what we all encounter around the world. And we consider ourselves World First Nations women that live in Australia on what we consider stolen land. So it's all of that all wrapped up into a nice pretty bow that says cabaret. Like if you want to like narrow it down into something that people can comprehend a bit further, then often will be categorized in cabaret, but it's definitely pushing the boundaries of that.
Yeah. Well, to be, first of all First Nations is amazing too, and to center those stories, I think, is really amazing and provocative, and still, I think in 2019 is not a thing that we see enough of.
We've felt that over our time working together in Australia. And that's why it's been so important for us to continue to put our stories on stages.
How long have you all been working together? How long has Hot Brown Honey been?
Well, we've been working together for over 15 years.
Oh, wow.
Might be closer to 20.
It is actually closer to 20 now.
Yeah, so we've been making stuff sort of separately out in the world. And we kind of started Hot Brown Honey it came as an idea just to go, wow, we're kooky, political, doing weird stuff when there is no spaces for us to do this, especially in Australia. And then we really were like, okay, let's just start a night, see how it goes. And that kind of was very, happened a few times. And then that's kind of when Lisa and I were like, it's time to write this show, because there are so many honeys out there, all on the fringes, and we're like, still not centre stage. And there's still not a real I don't know whether it's a push or just a getting those beautiful brown faces centre stage, and that's across the board.
I mean, in Australia, it's a whole other dialogue around getting through the gates, and I think part of our strategic thinking was to actually be on not just centre stage, but infiltrate main stages. So we Opera House, we were like, we want to be there. Why can't we be there? We're excellent. So it was a bit of when we sat down and wrote the show, it was with those things in mind, because I'm sick of walking in the halls of some of these theatres and just poster after poster, nobody looked like me. So that was part of our initial ethos, and it's worked.
Well, you're touring internationally. It's amazing. How would you say the reception has been in Australia and also international stages?
Wow. We've had some really interesting experiences. We've had some really wonderful experiences, playing in Canada has been quite amazing. At the South Bank Centre in London was off the charts. Then we've done some shows in Australia that, like, you know, there's some moments where, you know, we have all of our people, of course, who are just so wonderfully supportive, and then you have the direct audience, general public, who are like, I'm not happy with this situation.
But I can't get out.
I can't get out, can't leave.
Yeah, I think like the dialogue in Australia, like, you know, sometimes when we present our stories, it's making our middle white class theatre goer, like, you know, that's the majority of people who buy tickets to theatre in Australia, and it's probably quite universal.
Quite similar.
Yeah. That we're challenging what an Australian story looks like, and unfortunately a lot of our history is wrapped up in very fierce patriotism.
Yeah,
that's the right word, but we've felt that feeling, you know, of arms crossing, and, you know, we're almost as a country a bit too polite to actually leave, although there are some that will leave, but there's the energy that you feel resonating, and we've actually felt that most in our own country, because that's the story we're trying to you know, uncover and dig up. Yeah, and then the other side of the scale, like, you know, we've just come from some of our Canadian stops, and I think their dialogue around reconciliation and Indigenous stories is, you know, it's definitely being talked about, and I'm not sure if it's because it's like, oh, that's their story, not our story, whether they're more open or more loving, but yeah, we've had incredible shows there, and we really know, coming here, we're like, I don't know what's going to happen, you know.
Well, even in Canada, the dialogue is quite different around indigeneity in Canada, which I've only kind of glimpsed at, but I think even just the population, I think, of Indigenous folks, and like the way that they are able to mobilize is really amazing, and has been really, I think, a great example to think through how a settler colonial, you know, kind of country can engage with their Indigenous population. I think obviously there is a lot to be done, and there's, you know, that's a continuing dialogue, but I think that at the very least the acknowledgement of wrongdoing and stealing the land, I think, is far more advanced in many other places, such as the United States.
Yeah, it's really interesting too, like just being able to be a little bit out and about here and going, oh, okay, there's like such a, like, you know, going to the public and, like, you know, just feeling there's this real sense of community, you know, they feed you and then you go and see stuff, and, you know, you see these young people doing their thing, and it's just like, wow, still, and even though, you know, in Australia there's some tokenism around an acknowledgement of country, I'm just like, just that moment to go, you know, we're here, you know, just to say, hey, this is actually, this is stolen land that we're on, and we've come from, you know, slavery, stolen land. That's all a part of this big picture. Same with Australia, you know. Yeah. So it's, I find it really interesting to kind of go, oh, okay, these are the similarities, these are the differences. Yeah.
What other places have you all performed? I want to say I saw something about South Africa too.
Oh, we haven't been. We want to go because that's my country. So, I'm definitely African diaspora. Like, my parents came to Australia under apartheid, so as refugees. So, amazing they went to Australia. Because it's just that, like, you start looking at history and going, oh, well, apartheid, like, you know, it actually came from Queensland, where I now live, and it made its way over to South Africa, and then we moved over to here. I was like, okay, this is all quite intersectional.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things people can look forward to this week with the performance?
I think to have a really good time, for one, you know, like it is, we really do encourage our audience to have an overwhelming sense of community almost, you know, we welcome them into the theatre, like we try to, from the moment that doors open, we want people to understand this is our space, this is our safe space, and we welcome you, you know, no matter what you look like. But then we also are encouraging people to, like, engage their bodies, engage their vocal, you know, to be open to hearing the stories. So I think we've tried to use, like, a lot of comedy and a lot of, you know, a lot of fun to just to make some of the harder issues more digestible, not digestible, but more just people more open to them.
Yeah.
You know, because we find that from our show and from having conversations with audience members, or you know, because people write to us like way after as well, once they've had some time to digest. Just that them just being on the roller coaster ride almost, of like having such a great time, and then they get home and they're like, oh. And then they have these conversations with their family at the dinner table, or their girlfriends, or their moms, and that for us is the most important part. And then for them to want to come and continue that discussion with us, whether it's online or
That's amazing.
That's,
I think humor is really good in that way too, right? It can lubricate a lot of these really difficult topics and conversations, and be more inviting, I guess, of a
and for us, we're very funny people.
You
know? we there's a lot of laughter in our life, and you know, we use that ourselves to get through life. So it's like it was a natural medium for us to take.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too what you're saying, because I'm thinking about the kind of traditional theatrical experience too. You know, you spoke about the traditional kind of audience, or you know, typical theater goer, and I think also disrupting the format, you know, and inviting a more participatory experience is always exciting, and you know, kind of disrupts these things, these sort of artistic rules, you know, that are often placed on bodies of color who are performing, you know, and it's also like, no, this is our way of doing this.
Exactly. Well, it feels like a club when you walk in the door.
I'm into it.
You know, we want to disrupt it. It's funny because like our work would probably sit really well in a club. You know what I mean? Except there's not enough lights and stuff. You know, so we love the theatrics of the theatre. So we're trying to sort of cross that feeling of bringing some of those, like a good night out, and we encourage it. Sometimes we get it. You know, people are just like, nah, I'm just going to dance in the aisle. We're like, yes, this is what we want from you. You know?
I actually think, I don't know if you feel this way, but a friend of mine who's a dancer often talks about the dance floor as a sort of utopian space, you know, where you get this mix of people that are coming in together to share this experience and kind of co-create an experience.
Definitely. And there was just some research done in London last year that talked about like when people have a theatrical experience, whether it be live music, live theatre, at one point in that performance, everyone's heart starts beating at the same time.
Ooh.
Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, that's everyone. Doesn't matter what your views are. Your heart is beating in unison.
Wow.
That's
really powerful.
Really, I'm like, that's it.
I know, we need everyone to have those watches that
like a Fitbit or something.
So we can see it.
That would be fun. That would be like a cool thing to have in a club or something. The Fitbit that's like everybody's is kind of like like a, what do you call that? Like a strobe light or something.
That's awesome.
Very cool. So speaking of Beyonce, everything is set in a beehive, right? And then does Beyonce's music make an appearance?
No.
This is a selfish question.
I mean, we would love to. We can't actually use Beyonce in theatre. But that's fine. That's fine. We still love her from afar.
It is. The beehive we like to call the mother. She speaks as well. So she really gives some of the commandments of what's going on.
I see, right. The beehive is like this female-led space. Oh, I love it. Very cool. And you are the queen?
No, I'm sorry.
Game changer.
Very cool.
So like I get to like, you know, basically the story is like the mother's had enough. She's like, I did not give you coconuts for brains, what is going on? And then she has to send down Busty, and Busty has to call the honeys because, you know, it's that vibe. Charlie's Angels, where are you all? And then the honeys like kind of just come into being.
Oh, that's amazing.
And it's almost like you channel your knowledge through all of the wonderful writers and poets and of you know, before our time. Or living.
Right. Wow, that's really powerful too, to think about the hive. There's a lot of, I think that I see that model coming up a lot in really beautiful ways, historically but also presently, around sort of that structure as a model for how people can work together to undo all of these sorts of problematic, you know, structures in the world.
Definitely. And it's really like, I mean, also did a bit of research about bees. So we know a lot about bees. But like it's a matriarchal structure.
Right.
So that's definitely where we go to every time. It's
Mhm.
like, okay, this is a complete flip on the way we live now.
Right.
You know, in a patriarchal colonial structure.
Mhm.
So what would it look like if it was the other way around?
Yeah.
And that's the world we want to create.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's even, in the words of Dr. Angela Davis, it's like we have to act as if it's possible to radically transform the world,
Mhm.
and you have to do it all the time.
Yeah.
So we are constantly doing it.
Yeah.
That's why we, even on whether it be social media or, you know, wearing these tracksuits, it's like, this is about visibility.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know what's amazing is that, I mean, that story resonates. It's interesting that you bring up Angela Davis. She was at our 2016 encuentro in Santiago, Chile. And
Yeah.
to see, you know, they have a whole villa there that they've called like Villa Angela Davis, in Santiago, you know, and to see how that message translates across cultures and
Yeah.
across time is really, you know, speaks to perhaps the unfortunate, you know,
Mm.
part, which is that we still need these
Yeah.
messages and that there are so
Yeah.
many things that need to be changed, but also that, you know, that there is a universality in that, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. What would you say has changed from the time you started to now in the narratives that you've been trying to shift, and what do you think still needs to shift?
Wow. Things have, like, I mean, in making the show's still a sort of living, breathing entity. So,
Mhm.
but the interesting part is, like, as we've gone through the process of performing and making and whatnot, we're really finding movements come to the forefront as
Mhm.
well. So, you know, whether it be, like, when we started, it was like Black Lives Matter, like, that became,
Right.
like, it became visible.
Oh.
Everyone was able to see what was going on, and then Me Too,
Mhm.
that became visible. Like,
It's been about 5 years now that we've been on the road, so it's
Yeah.
been interesting to be a part of this conversations,
Right.
and these more and more conversations coming to the forefront,
Yeah.
and being able to be feeling part of a bigger conversation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's been quite a lot that's
Right.
been happening in the
Happening.
last 5 years as far
Yeah,
as
absolutely.
our voices.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's been great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially because people then find new ways to connect to our story, because they
Mhm.
also see that we are another part of the conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and so they're not coming in all.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even Beyonce, like, we were
Yeah.
like, when Lemonade dropped, we were like a point of reference
Mm.
for the world to what we do.
Right.
Like, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's really amazing.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I guess it's exciting to think about what you all are doing in context with what we do over at the Hemispheric Institute, because we're very much centered in the Americas, you know, and so thinking through changing the dialogue from like a Western perspective of, you know, north to north, Europe to the US kind of a context, to a north to south or a south to north kind of conversation, you know, and so thinking about performance practices too as ways of transmitting knowledge, you know, because knowledge should not only be privileged to the literate and the powerful, you know, and so that's been the big thrust of our founder, Diana Taylor, and so we've, you know, it's very cool to see though that to think through that conversation outside of the Americas as well, but also with Indigenous folks, you know, First Nations folks, outside of that context. I mean, we do definitely work with a lot of First Nations people in Canada, in the U.S., some in the U.S., I would say primarily in South America. But, you know, I think there's a lot of overlap with what you all are saying about the politics and about the narratives of stolen land, and how, you know, starting from that understanding, you know, shifts an entire conversation, you know, and reframes the entire conversation of belonging, of nation, of all of these things.
Yeah, definitely. And then, or like, in saying that too, it's like that real getting down to the nitty gritty, like even those microaggressions that you know, we all have had to deal with, like you know, right down to hair, like, you know, and body and consent and stuff like that. It's like absolutely has to shift that everything when you start from that very grassroots level.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and I guess you've already kind of alluded to this, but do you still find that there's resistance within Australia or even globally around starting from a First Nations perspective, or?
Wow. Yeah. Well.
Well, some don't even read that into it.
Yeah.
You know, it depends on where they're coming from to begin with. But there's definitely different had all sorts of resistance to the show and all sorts of love as well.
Yeah.
But for people to even feel so angry by us just telling our stories, you know, like it's pretty. It's sometimes it's like, wow, this is like, I'm literally, you know, I'm not saying this is your story. I'm saying this is my story. Have a minute. Let's just celebrate me.
Right.
But that can make somebody so angry.
Right.
It's like, you know, but then being able to, sometimes it works when you can have a conversation.
Right.
Like try.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is tiring,
Yeah.
and we all know
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you want to and sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's from it ranges from that to just, you know, like we had some lovely older white ladies in Canada who were just like, thank you very much. I'm going to have a good think about things when I get home. You know, like, okay, cool. That's much
great.
nicer. You know,
Absolutely.
I just never thought about it. And then I was reading a review the other day where a reviewer said that he was overhearing this group of men who thought that it's a tricky thing with our show because sometimes it can people just look at the poster and come. So we had like a pick up butts party, you know, something like that, and they were like, they started at the beginning of the show, woo! And then by the end he said that they, you know, you could hear them muttering, and like one said to the other like, oh, you just never think about this stuff, do you? You just, you know, like, so I think there's many different levels of
it, yeah.
Oh, I wouldn't call that resistance, but
Yeah.
it's like,
The resistance is often from Australians.
Yeah.
Overseas.
not so much.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Still from Australians.
Well, it's interesting,
Well,
like even like when we're in a different context, say we were in London and we had that kind of, that's not what we're like, and it's kind of like,
we have
you know, it actually is like,
Right.
so, you know, we're just reflecting back what we've lived.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think that can be hard for people, you know. I always kind of, when I'm having, you know, those moments where I'm feeling more generous and want to talk about, you know, race or, you know, gender and sexuality, whatever, you know, I always kind of tell somebody, if you're implicated, don't immediately, if you feel implicated, don't resist that or don't immediately become defensive, you know. Kind of sit with that discomfort and try to see what that is at the root, you know.
Yeah. That's the tricky bit.
It's very tricky. I mean, you know, I think one person, I've heard somebody say this in space before, that everywhere that there's a privilege, there's a blind spot, you know. Around ableism, around language, you know, gender, anything, you know, race, obviously.
Yeah, we had a few, like, we had some very fiery feminists that didn't like our show in Edinburgh, actually. We were like, oh, okay, we thought we were part of a feminist intersectional conversation. But, so it's just, you know, like, you can come from, you just don't see it coming sometimes.
But, you know, I mean, I've had feminists kind of, like, try to silence me in certain ways, or I've had interactions, in particular, I'm thinking of one with a white feminist who was sort of policing my speech, and it was like, this should be clear that, you know, it's not the best idea to police black women's speech. You know? It's not a feminist gesture. But, you know, I mean, a lot of unlearning, I think.
Yes.
And we've been very lucky too that a lot of people who love and support us will help come in for that conversation, like with online social media stuff. Because you know, for us it's like, oh, can we do this today? Or it can really like shift the whole team, like a certain type of post, or you know, and we try to monitor that because it, you know, like we're on the road all the time and our self-care and all of that stuff. But then to feel like we have all of these other supporters that have the time and mental space to be able to take that conversation on. That's been really helpful.
Right.
And also I really like what you say about having the time and mental space to take that on, because also that can, as you said, can be very draining too.
And when we understand that conversation around, you know, it's not up to us, you know. So it just depends how you feel that day. If you feel like it, you know, go for it. And you know, we have a ethos across the company that we sort of, I don't know if retaliate is the right word. We come back with love. You know, so whether it's like just asking more questions, but we don't. Even if we are feeling on the other side, like
and it's definitely part of our like performance practice that you know, as Lisa has said, like, you know, it's the stage is our battlefield. This is where we're going to hold this space, and this is where this is going to happen. And you know, as part of the show, we do invite people in and talk to them, and we do that at the end of shows too. It's thank people for coming, and those are the moments where we have some quite intense conversations.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just like selfies,
Lots.
you know, but
It's an
like,
important practice.
yeah, but it's also like, okay, that's us done.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we've had to
Yeah.
learn that too
Mhm.
over
Yeah.
the time. We've gone, actually, this a whole bunch of different experiences might spiral.
Mhm.
So then we're like, actually, okay, let's make a decision as a company
Right.
that that is our battlefield,
Mhm.
you know, and that if we do anything extra, that is a bonus,
Right.
you know, but if we don't, then that's
Right.
okay.
That's okay.
you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you can, you know, especially when you're having these big conversations afterwards, especially other performers or women just go, like, just crying because they feel their story is there.
Mhm.
We're their story, that we are able to just take that on, but not to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like this
It's
all
a
the
big-
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like, not to carry it necessarily. That
Yeah.
can be,
Yeah.
But we've had to learn that. I don't like, you know, this
Yeah.
the movement of hot brown honey has been more than we have ever expected. So yeah.
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 Can you say more about that?
Well, you know, like, we've never, we've always been a part of different movements. We're all of have quite activist backgrounds, you know, or like coming from Australia, you kind of have to. Yeah. So, it's really, and when we made the show, we were like, oh, we'll just be telling our stories, you know, make it look awesome and whatnot. But then we have found that there has been this outpour, like, of just like people going, wait a minute, we haven't had anything like this come from where we've come from. So it's really, and like Lisa said before, we're a cog in a massive wheel,
Right.
as this world, this troubling world that we live in, moves towards change. And we're just like this little moment over here going, we want to see this change a lot as
Right.
well, you know, and then there's a whole heap of people that we can affect by that. You know, it's funny, like, we're not out to like go, oh yes, we're changing the world, and yes, this is happening, but like, it does sometimes feel like we're in the movement, like, and in this massive movement that's like actually going to hopefully tipple over those others over there.
And having people say to us that our show changed their life.
Yeah.
I was just like, oh, that's incredible. Are you like, for real? Like, you know, is this a compliment or is this for real? But it's been over and over and over, and which I just think is like, sometimes being able to see yourself differently just makes you go, well, I can do this or I can do that. So we've had numerous people do that to us now, and this, like, our show isn't really a one visit show. People keep coming back. You know, like in the 2 weeks we had in Vancouver, we'd see people 4 times in 1 week. It's the same show, but you know what I mean. They're like, we're coming to church. I was like, okay. You know, so there's been that. I don't know if we expected. You know, and people like wanting to be a part of our journey continuously. So that's been really humbling.
That's amazing. Well, that kind of leads into the question I was just thinking of around the ripple effect maybe that that you've all seen kind of grow from this work, you know, and particularly in evolving conversations globally around indigeneity and, you know, and land. I don't know if you've seen anything kind of emanate from that, or what you've seen emanate from that, rather.
We found, I think the conversation, because it's, I suppose because what we've made, we really we want activists to come, we want them to fill their cups, we want, like, you know, artists to come and fill their cups. That's what, we've got a lot of that across Canada too, like, oh, you're giving us some medicine, thank you. Like, you know, so we really do see those conversations quite literally, like, you know, they're happening as we step into another nation across the world. We were like, wow, this is another conversation here. And especially in Australia, if you check out Dr. Chelsea Bond, who's an Indigenous scholar, what she has to say about it is actually quite on point, about Indigenous bodies, about black bodies, about land, and how they all connect, and how that has been a colonial force on Indigenous peoples across the world.
Right.
Yeah.
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 That's amazing.
Yeah.
So you called out Dr. Chelsea Bond
yeah.
and Dr. Angela Davis.
Yeah.
Who else would you say are sort of in the lineage that you all are pulling from to build this work?
We quote a number in the show.
Yeah.
So Dr. Lilla Watson, who's an Aboriginal scholar, and also Audre Lorde.
Important.
Of course.
Yes.
Yes. And then we've got, like, there's just a number of readings. I'm always reading, so and is that all we have in the show? I'm just trying to think. There's a couple of others. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie,
Oh, wow.
because they're so actually all their words are just so important. We call it the word to the mother, word of the mother.
Yeah.
And even just the words themselves, like wanting to flip language, like you know, like mother lover, and mother, just making trying to look at each. Or taking Shakespeare and making it like work for us, or and it's like we I think us growing up in that MTV era or whatever too, we're very like bite size, you know. So like, you know, one sentence that Busty does might have, you know, just driving from a number of pop culture references, but just being able to see what we can do with reclaiming words like cunt and you know, just like and that's been that's so challenging for our older audience in Australia. They don't like women to swear too much, and we're like, so now it's and this is what we've learnt too, so we now have these little intros that we do, we prepare them, we're like, it's gonna get loud, really really loud, you know, and that's because we've been silenced for generations.
Absolutely.
So are you ready? You know? So it's just like finding ways to keep their ears open. Because you can, like, I think in our earlier shows where we were still learning how to do that, you could see it go you know, on it, like, oh, there goes that person, there goes that person.
And it's shut down.
And that's important for us is to try to keep people's ears open as long as possible.
It's a hard balance to strike too, though, right? Because it's, you know, not conceding too much to somebody's, you know, sort of sensibilities that might be built on all of these problematic ideas around respectability and women's bodies and but also like I need to say what I'm gonna say.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's funny, like even reading reviews for us over the years, it's like you can tell who's written them without even seeing a name. It's like middle-aged white guy, old white guy, you know, black woman from over here. Like they're just the things that the multiple levels of things that people get, you know. It's like this one didn't understand it, or you know, got everything.
Right. Well, that's what we were talking about before we started around sort of, you know, these Venn diagrams, and I think that's often how diaspora works, right? Where it might not be the same exact experience that we're drawing from, but it all is, they're all feeding off of each other and linked, you know. Often sort of tragically, but also in a beautiful way that we can all sort of build communities across these different experiences, you know.
Definitely. And just thinking of an example of that too is hair again. We've got a track, don't touch my hair. Like, you know, but it's also like, then Solange has the track, don't touch my hair. There's FUPU from LA who have a track called, I'm like, every black woman needs a track called Don't Touch My Hair.
It is true.
Like, you know.
I just said that to somebody this week, and it was, you know, and I've taken to saying, instead of like the year of our Lord, it's the year of our Audre Lorde, 2019. Do not touch my hair. I shouldn't have to tell you this in 2019. You know? It's
That's it.
It's why that's a thing I don't know.
And then we talked to, like, you know, our Aboriginal sisters from Australia in the Pacific, across the Pacific. Hair has such a huge connotation, like, you know, what's happened, and it's the colonization of hair, basically.
Absolutely.
Very, very interesting.
What does that conversation looking like in Australia and the South Pacific?
It's very, there's some stuff just came out. There was a great doco actually on the South Pacific and hair, like the history of hair. Because it's always like you can tell when the missionaries have gone into a place like
hair, be gone.
Like
back.
You know. And even, you know, throughout South Africa too, it's like the straightening, the you know, all of that stuff, which was carried on from my mum actually as well,
Yeah.
until, you know, I was like, no more.
Right.
That cannot happen
Yeah.
anymore, you know. Yeah. So it's really interesting, because when it comes down to it, it's all about consent.
Mhm.
You don't touch someone without their consent.
Right.
Yeah, right?
Right.
And then especially like going in for the hair, I'm like, wow.
Mhm.
That's
I think they have a
got
long way to
particular-
go in Australia.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's got some,
Yeah.
there's some,
Yeah, I definitely think, I agree, I think the ultimate issue is consent, but I increasingly, I think, as I get older, but also as I travel, I'm kind of disturbed by the question. If even if somebody asks me, I'm kind of like, why do you need to touch me?
Yeah.
You know, why do you think that that's an okay thing to request,
Yeah,
you know? Yeah. I don't know, is that part of a conversation of like, do people often kind of, can I touch your hair?
I mean, they come up after the show as a joke. Some people are going, yeah, you know, like this one here.
Just said it
Right.
over and
You know,
over
we
and
said it over and over, and even to the point where we did it in heavy metal version.
Yeah.
We thought this was clear.
Right, right.
So, but then you'll see other people go, don't do it, you know. Like,
Yeah.
So, it's quite, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Very-
Sometimes repetition doesn't work.
I know. Or when somebody thinks they're being a little cheeky or something, you're like, no, that
it's
was
not funny.
It's not landing. Oh, okay. I'm so excited to see the show and to learn more also about, what you all are, your experiences and where you're coming from. I haven't been to Australia or anything, but excited to, both learn about something new and then also, see those moments of connection,
Yeah.
And we found that universality, which has been really interesting. The at which points, it's definitely like, even we have our awesome circus artist Crystal, who does a kind of a look at how like tourists act in, like, she's Indonesian Australian, so like in where she's, when they go to Bali or
Wow.
and that's been a really interesting point of call, because people are like, we know this behaviour. It's just really funny, because even like across the UK and even Canada as well, it's like, oh, okay, have I done that? Or like, has that been like, to be that disrespectful? It's particular with Australians, but like, there are really some points that you go, oh, I didn't really realise that would be a point of connection.
Yeah. Is this your first time touring the show in the US?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
wow.
Our debut in the
Yeah.
US tomorrow night.
Oh my God, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, we put it into the universe a few years back, so it's really nice to see that our mood board works. Actually, it wasn't a mood board. It was a grant application. We're like, you have to do the plan. It's like, we'll do here, then we'll go South Bank Centre and give the finger to Elizabeth, as in Elizabeth Hall. We're like, oh, that happened. Yeah.
I mean, they're kind of the same thing, right? Like a vision board and a grant application.
Yeah.
They try to make this thing happen.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, where are you headed after New York?
Vermont.
Burlington,
yeah.
Vermont.
Yeah.
That's our last stop for
Yeah.
this tour. And then back to Australia.
Then we go to Finland.
No idea what that would be like either.
Interesting.
I mean, we played Sweden last year, but we've been trying to talk to our Swedish friends.
Yeah.
So, what's it
Yeah.
gonna be like?
Very cool. Well, thank you. Break a leg tomorrow.
Oh, thank you.
Of course.
Exciting.